It's been a disappointing season for Utah, but they still have a chance to ruin BYU's season. Can Utah upset the Cougars and throw the Big 12 into chaos? We're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the comments, as well as on social media. We can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Utah rivals Matt Patton. And Matt, as we're gearing up for Utah's big showdown with BYU, I thought we'd just ask a simple question to start today. What is the percent chance that Utah can beat BYU? And I mentioned to our friends at FanDuel off the top, the spread to this game isn't as normal as what you might think when you have a team that is top 10 ranked, undefeated, versus a team on a 4-game losing streak. It's actually only 3.5. So because it's 3.5, and look, this is where it gets tough. Like when you look at just how bad some of the valleys have been for Utah's offense through this stretch, that's where it's hard to be like, oh, they have a great chance to win. And I'm not going to give them a great chance to win. But I think when you look at what is at stake in this game, this could in many ways be the game where it's just so hard to go undefeated in college football. That's where I can look at this game and be like, this is a chance where BYU could absolutely stumble against Utah. They've been close against teams like Oklahoma State. They weren't even favored against UCF. I'm going to give Utah a 35% chance to win this game with how their offenses look. That's where I'm feeling. I almost went to 40, but maybe because the line was 3.5, I'm feeling 35 right now. It is going to be very tough with how this Utah team is looked compared to BYU, but crazier things have happened in Rice-Eccles Stadium, especially in this rivalry.
Yeah, I was thinking about a 40%. And I think I'd stay at that. And here's the reason why. BYU's numbers, if you look at other top 10 programs, they usually have something that pops out that sets them apart, whether they're just one of the best offenses or one of the best defenses in the nation. BYU isn't necessarily a top offense or top defense. They're just extremely opportunistic. And so if they don't get the turnovers like they've been getting in the other games, I think Utah actually has a pretty good shot in this game for a win.
I agree. No, that's
40% shot.
Yeah. 40. Hey, I'll take those odds. I mean, look, we want to give BYU credit, right? Like they found a way to beat SMU early in the season. They found a way to be undefeated, even if they have not dominated anyone outside of Kansas State. But even if you look the way they beat Kansas State in that game, it wasn't really sustainable, right? Like long special teams touchdown, some of the turnovers like that. Like once again, credit to them for making those plays and the plays they've made all season long. But you can't look at that and go, oh, because as we mentioned, like there are statistical tangible evidence of these are what these top 10 teams do on offense and defense, and BYU doesn't do that. So that doesn't mean they're a better team than Utah. They can absolutely beat Utah in this game. They should beat Utah in this game. But Oklahoma State, based on how that game played out, could argue that they should have beaten BYU, right? That's why these games are played not on paper, because coming into the year, this wasn't supposed to be much of a game, but now it is going to turn into one heck of a game, and it is something that is going to be a sight to behold this weekend. Matt, you always do a great job of crunching the numbers heading into these games. What were some of the biggest numbers and just statistics that popped out to you when previewing this matchup between Utah and BYU?
Well, I was shocked that I thought BYU's defense was a little bit better than what they're showing on paper. Utah actually, in almost every category, is the better defense. And when you take a good defense and you have them at home, that actually speaks well for Utah. And I have to think that that's why the line's somewhat close. But the biggest stat to me was the interceptions. BYU has 14 interceptions on the year. And the interesting thing is 11 players have an interception. And that's the number that really popped out to me. That shows that everybody on that defense is looking for a way to take away the ball. And that's something that Utah has struggled to do. And so to me, that's the biggest difference. And if you trot out Brandon Rose, who's going to be getting his, maybe 20th snap of the year, or if you trot out Isaac Wilson, even, a true freshman in a big rivalry game, the chances of them throwing an interception to a team that has 11 ball hawks, that's dangerous for Utah. So it could be that they rely on their defense and just try to give the ball to Bernard and only throw it 10, 11 times. It's hard to say, but that's the biggest stat to me. Other than that, these two teams statistically aren't that different. It's just BYU's found a way to win where it almost seems like Utah's found ways to lose.
Yeah, and for Utah finding ways to lose is not get points. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Yep. 12 points per game.
Put it in the end zone. And BYU's done that.
Yeah, and you look at the way that if Utah just gotten to 25 points on the season, which is just, that's not even a crazy number. It's like a very average college football offense statistical number. They would only have one loss on the season to be at Arizona State. That's where it's so frustrating that this Utah team is in. But I've also talked about a lot on this show where, like, when you look at, like, why is Utah failing? They are so close to having successful drives, to finishing these drives. That's where it's so frustrating that the plays continue to mount up and happen. There will be guys open, and even the ones in particular, the biggest ones, like Wilson missing downfield, or Rose, whoever it is, that's going to happen. We'll talk about the quarterback controversy, not controversy, whatever we want to call it at this point, because we've done so many dang quarterback controversies. I just feel like we're doing Groundhog Day again. It's over and over and over again. But shifting the focus back to this game, I think this game is one where Utah, you look at how this offense has struggled. What has been one of the issues, like with Bajakian, he tried to make it easier, give more screens, hitches, all those things, like to make, and Wilson would miss some of those. Wilson, I think he's had an opportunity to work on the footwork. That's something I talked about with Brian Brown over the weekend. He said, hey, even though it's such a routine throw, the footwork and the timing, like how quickly you have to get that ball out, speeds you up. So the more reps he's gotten, whoever it is, has gotten a lot of those reps over the course of the bye, you expect him to be able to execute there. And that's something too, where just the full, not full, because you can't change the system too much, but what Bajakian wants to do with this Utah offense, it'll be better because they've had more time to incorporate some of his ideas. The system's the system. You can't change it too drastically, but the implications of the rivalry, we know this Utah team is not going to come out flat. They know what's at stake. I do think whoever runs out there for Utah quarterback, they've been battling against some good defenses recently. So it's not like this is such a massive step up in defense. In fact, like you said, their defense is, even like Houston's, I think defense is performing statistically better as of late, right? And there's still been opportunities and plays for Utah to make. If Wilson doesn't turn that ball over at the 50, maybe that game is different because Utah had some good offensive momentum before that. This game on paper, like we said, BYU should win and probably shouldn't be close. But when you really look at how these two teams have arrived at the places they're at, especially with the way the Utah defense has been playing, there's a lot of reason to think, Matt, that Utah can not just hang around, but get a monster upset in this rivalry.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it could definitely happen. It all just depends on if they can play a defensive game a lot like SMU did against BYU. The interesting thing I found is how consistent BYU's offense has been in scoring. They only have their 7 out of their 8 games they've scored 34 points or more. The only game that they didn't was against SMU. And so if Utah can follow a similar pattern there, that's where they can keep themselves in the game and have a potential to make that upset.
That's what their goal will be. One of the biggest questions, though, who's going to be leading this Utah offense? We do not know. And not surprisingly, Kyle Whittingham decided not to reveal it as he played it coy about will it be Isaac Wilson or Brandon Rose. We'll be breaking down which signal caller we expect to take the field, and as well as all the other comments we heard from the players in today's media availability coming up shortly. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Roy. Hey, Locked On Utes fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With Roy, the app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all the funds go to that specific player you choose. That's right. The funds and contributions you make on Roy go to the specific athlete that you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, the player I'm supporting is going to be Isaac Wilson. Some of you may be surprised by that, but here's my thing with Isaac. He has been a guy who works so hard over the offseason, won the backup job. I give him credit for that. It has not always gone to plan over the field, but I still believe he has shown flashes and signs of what could be a bright future at Utah. The freshman to sophomore leap is a real thing. And I would love Isaac to have the opportunity to make that freshman to sophomore leap at Utah. So that's why I'm supporting Isaac Wilson. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Isaac Wilson the love and keep him connected to Utah. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow, and you can keep your support by setting your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exclusive giveaway. You can win 2 tickets to a game this November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter the referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Download Roy now to join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_. Return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. Also want to take an opportunity to tell you all about another one of our sponsors of this episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of FanDuel, of course, we got the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball is over, but we still have college football, and we have Utah versus BYU. Utah, we talked about the line earlier. BYU is just a 3.5-point favorite. It's an in-state game, of course, between these two teams. Not too long of a trip for BYU coming up from Provo. So however you're leaning on this game, make sure you head over and check it out on FanDuel today. All right, Matt, back in here talking all things Utah versus BYU. And we still don't know who the quarterback leading Utah onto the field is going to be in Wilson or Rose. Kyle Whittingham, as he does, said they're going to keep it close to the vest. They liked what they've seen from both quarterbacks over the bye. I feel like I've seen some people tweeting out some roses, so I don't do the speculation thing. I'm not going to do that. We'll see who actually goes out there. But right now, if I had to guess, I still feel like it's going to be Isaac just because he'd won it in the past. I did not see a big difference between the two when they were out there. They both had turnover-worthy plays that hurt this team. Maybe, Rose made a couple of nice throws, I guess, on that last drive, but Wilson would do that too. He'd make a couple of throws and they'd stall at midfield. So it was kind of the same thing between both of them. Wilson won this job earlier. They have thrown their support behind Isaac Wilson before. I know they benched him for a little bit to try and get a spark going, but the truth is he beat out Rose for the duration of the offseason. He's had more plays under center. The coaches trusted him to start the year. I still feel like they're going to end up rolling with Wilson on Saturday, but how do you read this situation?
I was actually leaning the other way. I felt like a lot of the issues that Rose had in the last game was you could clearly see he didn't have the experience working with the ones. And so they just seemed like they were not on the same playbook. Really, they were no connection there. But I think with a week or 2 weeks, depending on how the snaps were split these last couple of weeks with the bye week, he should be able to make that. It seemed to me that he just had a little bit of a better feel for the offense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Wilson probably has more talent, but I wonder. I don't know. You alluded to it really well. Just how Wilson will have those games where he's making some great throws, but then there's some plays where you're just thinking, where did that even come from?
Mm-hmm.
It's like he just kind of goes into this 6 or 7 minute kind of a stupor where he just kind of gets into a funk, can't make easy throws. And I wonder if Rose brings a little bit more consistency that way. And I also feel like he didn't have enough time to really prove whether or not he could bring a spark. So I kind of lean towards Rose starting this game and with a pretty short leash, though. Probably, if he goes out and it's just a disaster to start, I could see Isaac coming right back in. We also don't know how hurt Isaac is.
True. That's a good point as well. Got banged up against Houston, and Whittingham has actually mentioned that as well. He's been fighting through pain, that's where Kyle's funny, right? We'll talk about injuries, but now it's affecting one of his players. And look, I don't like dumping on Isaac. I've done it a few times on this show just because, as I always say, if you just look at the games, what's wrong? You usually landed a quarterback missing a throw. So that's where this team's in a tough spot. He had comments on both quarterbacks I found interesting. This comes to us from Josh Furlong, just quoting Witt, said, generally speaking, we have a ton of belief in Isaac. He was thrust into a role we weren't expecting. Everything has been accelerated. First of all, I cannot stand a role we weren't expecting. Of course, you don't anticipate your backup playing, but that's where you need to be. Like, if that happens, that's where you don't have a true freshman as a backup. Kyle Whittingham, I know he knows this. Everyone knows this, but it's just that's the unfortunate thing about where we are. And then his comments on Brandon Rose, too. It's been practicing extremely well the last few weeks. So they felt like they wanted to give him a chance against Houston. And it'll be really interesting to see how long or short the leash is, because you want whoever you start out there to feel confident, to feel the offense is behind him. But then if it doesn't go your way, then obviously you do have to make that quick change, but then you're switching guys out and then the timing's not there depending on how the reps have been split up in practice and everything too. And it could be a mess. So I'm very curious to see how it goes. We also got to hear from the players. They're very fired up to play BYU. We know Jalen Glover is, and so are some of the other guys as well too. But Matt, just from all the quotes we heard from today, what was your biggest takeaway?
It didn't seem at all like Whittingham felt defeated, and I guess you wouldn't expect him to, but I think someone even made a comment on Twitter saying now he looks locked in. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. The second bye week is probably a good thing for this team to just clear their minds mentally. I mean, they went through this awful stretch. Now they had some time. I think Whittingham said they had 3 days off. So for me, it was more just about, does this team look focused and ready? Do they seem like a team that's ready to take on a rival at home and turn their season around? And, you can only tell so much from one press conference, but I like the vibes.
Yeah, I felt like the vibes were decent too. And, if there's one good thing about losing as much as Utah has, it's that you're kind of in that mode now where it's like, what else do we have to lose? We are at one of the worst teams in the Big 12 right now. The season's a disappointment. We're not going to be a Big 12 champ. We're just trying to get bowl eligible. So let's just go out there. All the pressure in this way, there's pressure on Utah in terms of just continuing to be a disappointment, right? But like I said in the intro, I think some people will hear me say, can Utah ruin BYU's season? They're like, one loss won't ruin BYU's season. More than likely it won't by itself, but what happens then if you let one loss come into more losses? This is a game that BYU should win. If Utah beats them, that loss could spiral into 2. Maybe that, and if you lose 2 and you're not the conference champion, then you're not getting in. So that's where Utah could absolutely knock down the first domino of an undefeated BYU team that leads to them spiraling out of control and ended up missing the playoff, which is still on the table. I like BYU. I think they're probably going to get in, but I could very well see Iowa State winning the conference, and then is a 2-loss Big 12 team getting in. That's going to be really interesting to see how it all ends up shaking out as we get in this new era of the College Football Playoff Committee. And we're going to get the rankings tomorrow. We'll be talking about that on, or you'll get it tonight. If the time you're listening to this, we'll talk about it on tomorrow's show for sure. But it is so we have BYU rivalry week back. We've been waiting so long for this moment, Matt, and I'm so fired up that it's finally here. You can tell the players are fired up for it too. And I feel like that's another thing. You mentioned the vibes being high, right? I just talked about how when your season, you didn't reach your goals, you can play, what else do we have to lose? But it feels like this group is fired up, like that Energizer bunny that is we get a shot at our rival. That gets the juices flowing.
Well, and this team came in with high expectations. The players were expecting to get a playoff appearance. They were expecting to win the Big 12. And so now what do they have to play for? This is kind of it. This is the big thing that they're playing for, because even if they do make a bowl game, they're not going to play a team as good as BYU. And so really these next few games that they have, they're going to be better than any bowl game that they'll get. So I think that's probably the new focus that they're looking at, just saying, hey, all right, we're 4-4, but hey, we have a chance to go knock down BYU. We'll get a shot at Colorado. We get a shot at Iowa State. They get to go out and prove that the season is not a complete disaster.
They do. And you can really find ways, some Utah fans have given up on the season. It's really easy to find a reason to tune in each week for this team. Number one, if you're still a fan, you should love watching and supporting your team. Let's break it down game by game, though. BYU. I mean, it's the rivalry. Come on. Like, who cares? If Utah was winless, like, we're tuning in to check out and see what this Utah team can beat BYU, because that's how it goes. It's the rivalry game. This is the implications, the rivalry being back, just the smack talk, all that. That's what we love about this game. After that, you got a chance to beat Colorado. I think Shedeur Sanders is a really good player. I think Deion Sanders has done a good job turning around the Buffs, but we know about all the comments and everything there of who doesn't want a chance to beat Prime. And that game's now big noon. That's a huge thing too. The fact that you're in prime time, that's an awesome thing. Iowa State's another top 10, or they'll stumble a little bit, but they're still a top 20 team. You're telling me you're not excited to play a top 20 team? That game will be, of course, getting a good nationally televised spotlight. You're not fired up for that. Even the UCF one, if some of you are like, oh, I'm not going to tune in, that game might not be fun. Well, we don't know if Utah's going to get bowl eligible. So that'll be the last time to watch Utah football for over 200 days, people. So there are more than enough reasons to continue to tune in and support this team. And it absolutely starts this week against the Cougars. And speaking of this week's game, we saw an interesting potential lineup change, not lineup change, but position change. What's going on? We got to talk about Cameron Calhoun's ex post, and we'll be breaking that down in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Zybotics. Zybotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zybotics your first drink of the night. You can drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Then just pace yourself during the night. Hydrate, get a good night's sleep. Then third, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day because you took the steps to best prepare yourself for the crazy night. Go to Zybotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. That's all caps, no spaces. Zybotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you money, no questions asked. Remember to head to Zybotics.com/LockedOnCollege, all caps, no spaces, and use that code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. You can try Zybotics today. All right, Matt. Got some interesting things to come out from one Utah player today. Cameron Calhoun posted on his X account that on one of the depth charts that he is listed as a wide receiver. And I think that all kind of caused us all to do a double take, like what's going on? You know, we've seen this happen before with Sione Vaki and everything. And while for a moment I was like, is this actually real? It just doesn't make any sense. I'll also say, I think that depth chart is definitely outdated because Sam Heward is listed as QB3. And we know Kyle Whittingham said Sam Heward's out for the season with an injury too. So as funny as this and wild as this would be. And also, I mean, if I was like guys like Darren Zipper, obviously it's not even mentioning the Damian Alfords of the world, I would be absolutely extremely frustrated at it. Doesn't seem like this is real, right, Matt?
I don't think so. I just was pulling it up again on my phone just to see if there's any updates or anything. I mean, this is College Football Network that he's pulling this depth chart from. His own tweet just had 3 dots. So he could just be having fun with it. It could be Utah decided to get creative. And if he does play some receiver, I doubt it would be much. But it's fun. It's fun.
How would college football, and I like College Football Network, I've read some of their stuff before. How would they have it though? And ESPN, all the Utah beat reporters, how would they miss it? But College Football Network get is where I also land at, right?
Yeah, you have to think that's the case. It's something to talk about, something to look at.
Something to throw in the last segment of the show.
but it's hard to believe. The main reason why is just because Utah is already pretty thin at corner, and Calhoun's proven to be a pretty solid contributor there and great potential. He might be the number 1 guy at corner next season, depending on what Zamiah Vaughn does. So, I just can't. It wouldn't make any sense to me. But then again, Colorado's got a pretty good corner that plays receiver too. So,
yeah, and we've seen Jaquindon Sione Vaki last year, right? He played both ways and was absolute star with this Utah team. You mentioned Travis Hunter, so it's doable. But if that's the point we're at with this Utah receiver room, like I still feel confident in the guys they got. Of course, Utah doesn't have Money Parks anymore, but Munir McClain, Zipper, there's lots to do. Zipper, also McClain isn't even listed on here as an option. So that's where also like he was on the field just last week for last couple weeks ago for Utah. So that's what also leads me to cast it to doubt, but definitely worth talking about since what Calhoun himself did tweet it out. It's man, this covering this team is never dull. Even when a 500 season, there's always something going on. And this week it's BYU. It's the rivalry game. Matt, are you feeling the Utah win?
I have to stick to that 40%. And so if I were a betting man, which I'm not, because even when I research something, probably way
sports are so unpredictable, right?
It's completely, especially college sports, because now we're dealing with young men. You just never know. No, I think if I were to throw out a prediction, I'd probably say BYU 24, Utah 21. So sticking really close to that line. However, with the caveat, I can see many paths where Utah could win this game.
Yeah, I can too. And I'm excited to continue to break down those caveats all week long. Make sure you guys give Matt a follow on X, Patton_Matt. Does a great job tweeting out Utah stats, also writing for Utah Rivals. Matt, appreciate you stopping by.
Yep, always a good time. Thanks a lot.
That's going to do it for today's show. We got a lot to talk about, though, as I mentioned, as we gear up for Utah versus BYU, the first edition of this long-standing rivalry in the Big 12.